Welcome to Inform TV. I'm Alan Repke, Alexandria, Minnesota. Today we're going to take a look at what has been happening in the news, in the marketplace, and talk about some topics that I hope you discuss over the campfire as you're enjoying your long Memorial weekend and watching this program. For truly we're in incredible times as we observe our Memorial weekend, where we honor the men and women who died in service of this country. We hope you all take some time to remember that, as well as honor the men and women that serve in our military to protect us, both past and present. We have to look at our overall picture. And when we have a national holiday that is based on an incredible somber event, yet we do it as citizens as a celebration of their dedication and the importance of this great country. And when we do that, we have to ask ourselves a lot of questions. And we have to ask, what really did they sacrifice for? And I think we have to understand they sacrificed for the principles of our country, the principles that all men are created equal, that we all have the right to pursue a better lifestyle for our families, that we have a right as a rich and powerful nation to see that we have a roof over our head, that we have food in our stomach, that we have clothes on our back, we have modern health care, and we have a reasonable approach to a refreshing, quiet retirement period. And at this Memorial weekend, probably more so than in a long time, we have to question what is going on in this country. We have to question our leaders as they come home. The legislative session here in Minnesota is over, and probably in our neighboring states as well for the most part, or at least a break. And our elected officials from Washington, D.C. That this is not just a time to pat everybody in the back, but rather to point and shake a finger at these guys. As truly, we can make a very strong case of what is happening in the marketplace, what is happening to our fellow man, what is happening around the world is very concerning. In fact, it pretty well shows that the days of kicking the can down the road are long overdue for a stop and to face reality. And one of the things, this reality as we move into election season now, is we as informed citizens have to start demanding that it's time we as Americans and countries around the world start taking our medicine, start living up to the mess that we have allowed to happen, that the same old leaders that have been there for years have allowed to happen. And we don't get in the false mood of glorifying them as we're doing to the people that died for our country to see that we could be here today, as well as our men and women that served our country to keep us safe. And when we look at the whole thing, this has been a week of interesting marketplaces. Obviously, we've had the Facebook fiasco. I'm recording this on Tuesday evening, coming into the Memorial weekend, and Facebook that was offered at $38 bumped up to $42, and the close today was $31, and I don't know where it's going to be at when you watch this program. But the reality is shows that so many things have happened in the marketplace. The volumes have got so astronomical that we have allowed certain individuals to become so incredibly rich so empowered by a marketplace that government doesn't seem to have even a clue what's going on, and yet at the same time the marketplace itself doesn't seem to have a clue. And surely all the hype of a CNBC and our major networks have probably made a lot of individual investors with egg on their face this Memorial weekend. And yet we have an environment where we have to ask ourselves, what is a marketplace? And I've always contended here, you folks that watch, that agriculture is the best way to understand what a marketplace is, because it was the first marketplace, obviously, for food and fiber. As our world evolved, our nation evolved, where the buyer comes together with the seller in an environment where they make an exchange of currency for the good or service they need. And that hopefully we have a marketplace that has been watched so it's not manipulated like we're seeing right now, where the buyer can afford to buy the product and the seller can continue to make the product available to us, such as the food and the fiber, food for our stomach, the fiber to put clothes on our back, and a roof over our head. That we have a marketplace that's in balance, that the buyer can afford to buy the product, that the seller or producer of that product continue to do it, so the goods and services are there. And that profits don't become the driving force in the marketplace. And yes, we have to have profits, but when we look at a Facebook and when we look at the JP Morgan thing this week, people, we have to ask ourselves what's going on here. And we have the CNBC, the business crowd say, what is first and foremost? Profit. The business must be profit. Now, the president has brought up is, what about profits? Are profits the only driving force? My dad always used to complain, and as a young businessman, I would think, I was always confused about, we have to have profits. And he always talked about the fact that, yeah, we need profits, but the pigs don't need to be fed. We need to see that everybody can have some bacon, and the pigs just don't get fatter. And as we get into this political season, I have to take my hat off a little bit to the president. Some of the things he said this week irritated me, but the one thing that he did say are these massive profits of the apples and these speculators that drove our economy into a crash in 2008, and now we continue to face a cliff. What are we doing as citizens to see that there's balance in this marketplace that I talk about, so we can afford to buy the sweet corn that we're going to like to eat? We can afford to buy that steak or hamburger or hot dogs on the grill, and understand that it's going to continue to be there, that the grocer and the packer and the farmer aren't living in luxury, while the people that toil on a daily basis 40 hours a day have little or nothing, or losing their homes. And I think you get what I'm talking about here. We've talked about it here before. But at the same time, we have now the MF Globals that we talked about. They're still, if not 1.2 billion, at least 600 million that they have no idea. It's like almost 6 months later. What kind of accounting system? And when our farm state senators and congressmen are back, what's going on with the accounting industry? What's going on with the marketplace? Why can't you find that MF Global money? What has happened with the trading that went on with Facebook? And what is this talk about people as individuals shouldn't be investing? They should be turning it over to these massive hedge funds and where they get. That's a bunch of baloney, people. If we truly are investing in something like a capitalistic society talks about, you make money, and what you don't need to for your daily bread, so to speak. You invest to protect your future, and you invest on a dollar per dollar basis. Our congressmen, our senators, our media, our CNBCs, our academia have turned this over to the marketplace is too complicated for individuals. Baloney. Only because we allowed the crooks and the pigs to take it over, if that's the case. Because investing is just that. You invest a dollar into a sound investment or a sound service that we know we're going to need, and long term, yes, you will get a return on that investment if regulators and our government are doing the job, and that we see that we have elected officials that know something and aren't there just to take care of themselves and their special interests. And when I look at the farm situation again, as far as relating to markets, no matter what field you're in, is the fact that thing that caught my attention. In farm country, we've heard, whether you live in the Twin Cities, in Fargo, Rochester, Duluth, Wilmer, in about 9:30 in the morning, if you've had an AM station on for decades, you had the opening grain and livestock market. And suddenly now, with all this debacle we had with derivatives in 2008, our congressmen and senators now had elected the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, as well as ICE in Atlanta, trade these markets on a 17 or 22-hour basis. I'm confused myself, and I followed pretty close. But anyway, here was the point. DTN, a global data tracker and information source on markets, when they talk about an opening market call, they don't have it anymore, people. Here's what they say. An editor's note: as electronic trade no longer stops before the pit opens at 9:30 Central Time, we will not be making opening calls in our before the bell comments. We will update you on whether the electronic trade is higher or lower before the pit begins to trade. Just think of that, people. We don't even have a market that stops long enough or trades in a reasonable basis. We've got to have it going 24/7. And the best example I want you to think about in this chaotic market is the vast majority of corn and soybeans are raised in North and South America. Why do we want to make it super easy for speculators on every continent to manipulate markets? Aren't we concerned about the buyer and seller being in balance? It's certainly not in balance when you have people trading with market and margins that don't have any grain elevators or food processing plants or farms to raise the raw product that we eat, do we? And what's also scary about this whole situation, and I, for one, have always said the delivery system in our older markets, Chicago wood trade markets, where you had a delivery system that had at least some power over these paper games, where you could deliver against a contract, a physical product, or take delivery of physical product. Now, these people in our Congress have said we can trade all but the daylight hours of the United States here in around the world that don't produce this mass volume of product, or in the case of China, it's not a public market anywhere anyway, and yet this is traded strictly on a dollar for dollar settlement. In other words, what did they turn the marketplace into? Just a money game. It's not a mechanism anymore to see that the goods and services are priced at a fair basis, so we and the world have the goods and services we need. Take that to your congressman, because that is what's happened. And when we look at the Facebook mess, that's a prime example. Here we have a product that is making people just filthy rich, yet what is the service? Social media? What did social media also do this week? this poor young man who happened to be gay, where his roommate photographed him unbeknownst to him and put it on the World Wide Web, causing this individual to do what no one ever should do, of course. He committed suicide. Is that the social media? Is that the rights that we as citizens want to be out there? And is punishment for depriving this individual? And what does it do? Does that mean somebody else has the right to deprive us of our most intimate and personal moments and get a 30-day jail sentence for it? See what I'm talking about? When we have no government, that everything is a let's make money, let's trade this thing, let's make it look good, let's make sure the underwriters make big money, let's make sure the big hedge funds or the big individual, if they invested in something like Facebook that was grossly overpriced, at least as a price earnings rate. We heard all this garbage on CNBC. What is the real value of Facebook? There's no way of knowing. What are they talking about? We've had markets for decades. And what is the reasonable basis? It's times earnings. It's times revenue. There's a formula for all of this. And the Facebook thing just simply ignored it and put it off as a massive speculative bubble in the future. And I don't feel sorry for any of the investors that got in at this high price. And I don't think the court system should come in. People got their head handed to them, so be it. But our government, our elected officials that are going to be home this weekend, and the election process that we're going to start, the campaigns, we dang well need to be talking about this. What have we turned this marketplace into this Memorial Day for these incredible people that sacrificed their life to see that we would have a safe, balanced environment for mankind to go forward in. We sit here with an insider game just about on every corner. And then they come up with a Dutch auction. They come up with all these schemes and gimmicks. It's just incredible what's happening. And yet at the same time now, we talk about investing. What happened after the crash of '29? We put rules and regulations into place that eliminated all this speculation. Now, over the last 2 decades, we've unraveled it all. And instead of having dollar for dollar investment and people actually investing in something rather than a mirage, and we had banks that had a function of what? Writing a loan to an individual that qualified based on collateral. Now suddenly we got the greatest banker with his back to the corner, Jamie Dimon. Why? Because we've turned the marketplace, or our congressmen and our senators have turned the marketplace into a gambling casino where our banks suddenly are gambling casinos. And nothing is based on dollar for dollar investing. And we hear this garbage about a 401k plan must be turned over to a speculator. What you're talking about. We saw what happened this week when we turned things over to speculators. And yet at the same time, we have to talk about in this post-World War II model, this Memorial Weekend, we still have the value of money. But we have many currencies right now grossly overvalued, and I've talked here before about the euro. How can Europe be in economic chaos from little Greece to Italy to Spain to Ireland to Portugal to France, and their currency worth more than the American dollar? Absolutely ridiculous. And we suddenly are in an environment where Greece, the little tiny country of Greece that I've been to a couple times, is too big to fail. Greece needs to take a blankety-blank kicking. And they need to lose big time to send a message. And if it takes Italy to do the same, fine and dandy. It's time to quit kicking the can down the road and to see that we have some leadership in place, that some of these people take their medicine. And unfortunately, it's going to affect all of us. But it's time we take our medicine, because that's what a democracy is all about. A capitalist democracy is all about. We talked about it some here last week. We have to see that the players in the market, when they lose track of what the function of a market is to bring a buyer and a seller together with goods and services that are needed, not on a margin trading scam and scheme that has put trillions of worthless derivatives, but incredible power to a few despicable people, a few despicable companies. It is outrageous then when we look at this. And when we look at this spotlight, when are our leaders going to step up the plate? That's the main discussion we need to have over the campfire, and we need to see that what is our business climate going forward. The reality, if we're going to have a business climate, we're going to have to do the same thing they did in 29 people. We're going to have to shore up this massive speculation, this massive margin trading that even the most sound minds, the Jamie Dimons, that were supposed to be able to get their hands around this thing, they can't. If people like Jamie Dimon can't get their hands around it, how are we going to have retirement investment so you as citizens are taken care of? The answer is we can't. And the reality is we have to see that we start talking about what is a balanced budget, what is the revenue we need to see that we have a balanced budget, what is the plan to see that we have our debt being serviced and long-term eliminated. What are we doing to see that this housing mess, that we do not continue to allow these old junk houses here I see in every community around the state, around the nation. We have them here in Alexandria that never should have received a 30-year mortgage and certainly should not be putting a rope around somebody's neck with a 30-year mortgage. Yes, the value of those houses comes down because it should, because many of them should just be knocked down and started over, and then we'll give you a 30-year mortgage on them. But we cannot allow these old houses that are something that are going to need massive repairs every year and still will be an old piece of junk, to allow the real estate industry, the banking industry, to hang it around some young kid or some young couple as neck. Because Education Minnesota didn't teach them the facts of life, that we no longer can trust these so-called professional people in our midst. And it's time some of us that understand what's going on see that we have a government that steps up to the plate and looks at this mess that we face. Now, when we look at our president this week, like every week, we have some plus and minuses, but the CNBC type crowd is saying profit first. That's the only function of business. And when we look at the apples that have profited, what? By interesting gadgets? Yes, but they've profited by massive power granted by government. And I have to agree with the president this week that massive profits aren't needed to bring the goods and services we need. Massive profits to these filthy rich with incredible tax manipulation is not lowering the deficit. This incredible myth that they keep talking about when they talk about growth is just nonsense, people. We're in a situation here in the United States where we have to devalue. And Europe has to devalue. That's what is happening in Europe. They let their wages get out of line, their government benefits out of line, their corporate profits out of line. Yet in rural America here and across the working class, we need wages to come up some, because it's nonsense that what we're allowing the sales staff and the management to put in their pockets when we have people working 40 hours a day that all they can do is pay on this overpriced mortgage they have and buy food and go home and watch television and kick their own can down the road. People, we're in serious times and we need serious discussions. And hopefully that's what Informed TV is all about. How do we do this? How do we see that these IPOs that we just had with Facebook, that how do we address that we have a media? I watched CNBC this afternoon and they were basically talking about the Facebook thing of how did this happen. Well, if you watched CNBC for the last 2 weeks, all they could talk about is this propaganda of how high the value of Facebook could go. Yet they all talked about the fact that their revenue sources were very limited and they still hadn't figured out how to become profitable in relationship to what their product was delivering. And what also is very interesting as far as an item at the campfire that's not talked about a lot, or maybe not at all, is the fact these investors that had this stock that were able to dump it on the market at $38 or more, how much did they have in it, people? They had $1.11. So at 38, they were making 34 times their investment. Just think about that. You see why I back the president when he talks about we need to look at these incredible profits. They're not making incredible profits without incredible power for government. They're not making these incredible profits without being a total and complete manipulated game. And when we look at the same time, we looked at an Apple this week where it just went straight up, and where they're making 50% profit. For every dollar sales, they make 50 cents. They got over $100 billion now of profit set, and he only paid 9% tax. How can this go on? This is items that must be addressed in this campaign season. These are items that must be pointed in the face of these congressmen and senators when they're home for the weekend of what are you people doing? And the reality is these politicians that have been there for years are no different than Lugar that was thrown out and we talked about in our last program. Why are we keeping these people in there? Because they have failed us, and they have failed us miserably. And part of the reason they failed us, we've talked about here, is the system must be modernized. We just had the end of this session here in St. Paul. We don't need 201 legislators there, people. We need to be talking about how do we get one body of really competent people there, whether the Republicans or Democrats, and what's this gridlock in Washington, D.C.? It's gridlock because we don't have a 4-year term for our congressmen, and we don't limit their stay in Congress. We don't have term limits. We have to have that. We need a 4-year term. We need to shrink the House of Representatives to about 200. We need to see that they're there with time to put a program together and follow the president, and we don't need 100 senators anymore. 50 is more than enough. So as you're sitting around the campfire discussing things over a beverage and some good foods and good friends and good families, bring up some of the things that you've heard about on Informed TV and send people to our website to look at the items we're talking about here, that items that must be addressed if we're going to get this country back on track. People, we're going to have to deflate and we're going to have to go backwards just like they did in the 20s, or certainly we're not going to be able to go forward for the next generation like we have to and must. Thanks for listening to Inform TV. I'm Alan Repke, Alexandria, Minnesota.